And joining me here in the studio is Arwa Damon. She's the president and founder of INARA, a non-profit organization that provides access to medical and mental health care to children impacted by human-induced or natural disasters, and currently has a team in Gaza. Arwa, thank you so much for coming in here today. It is a very tragic moment in this war in Gaza, where we're seeing all these deaths now, more and more children dying. What are you hearing from your colleagues right now about what's happening in Gaza?
You know what's really frightening is that the death toll is not entirely accurate. It is actually likely to be significantly higher. And this is because when we look at who malnutrition kills first, it is obviously infants. Their bodies are not strong enough to fight. And it's also children who have pre-existing chronic and or congenital illnesses. But because of the way that counts are carried out, their deaths do not necessarily fall underneath the sort of malnutrition death toll. And when I speak to our teams on the ground there, I mean, they are at a loss because they're doing what they can, but we don't have adequate supplies. They are exhausted. I mean, you're a correspondent there, you know, Ashraf and all of the other journalists on the ground, all of the humanitarian workers, all of the medical staff everywhere. They are also living through the same thing, because even if you have money right now in Gaza, there isn't anything to buy. And so you start to hear the exhaustion in everyone's voice. You see the fatigue on their faces. And then you have the bombs and the bullets, but also all of these other illnesses that are arising. Look, the Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza City has been cataloging a frightening increase in what's called, acute flaccid paralysis, which basically means that kids are waking up one morning and they can't move. Now, this is an infection that they believe is Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's very rare. Its prevalence in these sorts of numbers is something that is entirely unexpected. We have a case in one of our medical clinics, actually. But this is something that can lead to a death in a child. And so you have death attacking you from all of these different directions. And what makes it all even more atrocious, this is not new. This has been happening all along and culminated in the point that we're at right now.
You yourself, you've been to Gaza many times, both in your current role and also as a war correspondent. What goes through your head when you're seeing these images, hearing these reports about what's going on in Gaza?
Look, I've been to Gaza 4 times since October 7th in my INARA humanitarian capacity, and then I was denied entry by Israel in February and March, along with a number of other humanitarian and medical volunteers. There's actually been a 40%, if not more, increase in denials of entry to Gaza with absolutely no reason that has ever been given. What my mind goes back to is those sort of smaller moments on the sidelines that don't necessarily make it into the main story. And I think this is, important to also talk about, because that's what makes Palestinians in Gaza so extraordinary. And I'll just give you one example. Our program coordinator, Yusra, the other day went to visit a family, and they're beside themselves. The parents have nothing to eat. The children have horrific, disgusting diaper rash because they're sitting in their diarrhea and pee-filled nappies all day. There's no baby powder. And one of the little boys there, it was his birthday, and he wasn't asking for a birthday cake. He was asking for a loaf of bread. And so Yusra goes back on her own time the next day with 6 loaves of bread that she's managed to secure and puts a candle in it. This is something she did, not because she works for a humanitarian organization, not because she works for us, but because for her it was important to be able to give that child a tiny little bit of joy. And you see that everywhere. And that's what I constantly remember. That's what I'm constantly thinking about, is all these people who I've met who have shown me extraordinary graciousness and hospitality in the most atrocious conditions now are going through something even worse than what I saw them going through.
And that is, of course, also the meaning of the name of your organization, INARA, a ray of light, just putting a candle in a loaf of bread to give them something to hope for. But, children growing up in these circumstances, seeing war, seeing starvation, what kind of impact is that having on an entire generation of Gazans?
Look, devastating. An entire generation is at risk of being lost, because you're not just talking about a singular event or a singular trauma that is already devastating to a child. You are talking about the loss of everything that gives a child the pillars of stability that are needed for that child to then mature and develop into a physically and psychologically able to function individual. Now, that being said, it's not a lost cause. We can, if we are permitted, take the steps that are necessary to allow children not to heal. I do not like the use of the word heal when it comes to mental and psychological traumas, because you don't ever really heal. What you do is you learn how to live with the pain that was caused. But if you think about it, you and I, when we were growing up, we had a relative measure of stability in the knowledge that if we get hurt, our parents can make the ouch go away. If we're hungry, mom and dad can, give us some food. If we're scared, there's someone there to give us a hug. All of that has been taken away from Gaza's children. They spend all of their time right now waiting in line for water, running around with empty pots looking for food, where if they're lucky to even find it, I'm sure you've noticed this, when you look at the footage of what's being distributed as a hot meal, it's really just broth, because all there is a tiny amount of lentils that you then end up boiling into a broth to serve a lot of people. And so not only has childhood been robbed, but then the trauma triggers are constantly there, right? The death is around you all the time. You're watching your parents go through all of this. You've lost your, in so many cases, your siblings, your family, your everything. And we talk about the impact on children, and if that is not addressed, what trauma does is that it calcifies within you, and it actually physically and psychologically can prevent you from moving forward. But again, it's not a lost cause. None of this is a lost cause. We cannot afford at this stage right now to say, oh, what's happening in Gaza, it's too much.
You still have hope?
We do, yep. Yeah, we do. We do, in the sense of, look, I'm not the sort of person who is driven by hope, and maybe this sounds, a bit depressing, but I don't need hope to be motivated by what is the right thing to do. And so when it comes to Gaza, it's not necessarily about hope. It's about what is the right thing to do for Gaza right now. And it is blatantly clear that the right thing to do for Gaza right now is to open the borders, allow the thousands of aid trucks in, get the medical system back up and running, get everything that is life-sustaining functioning once again, and for this complete and total insanity to end.
Arwa Damon, thank you so much for coming in and giving us your analysis and, of course, that glimmer of hope in this situation.